There we go. Okay, we'll start with Elia, if you don't mind, to read for us this overview paragraph.
The universe is not random. God didn't just create a system of nature and leave it be. Nor does he simply pay attention to everything. Sorry, I don't know why, like I need to find my book because I can't see. Okay, let me,
if you want, I can zoom in a little bit more if it's too small.
Yeah, could you zoom in a little bit more? I don't know where I put my book. Okay. Yeah. He recreates every single thing at every moment in time. There is no unnecessary part of the creation, and every single person, place, thing, and time has a purpose and adds something important to the world. Therefore, there is no person or situation that is hopeless or meaningless.
So this class is going to come to speak about this point of divine providence, which means everything is here for a reason, for a purpose. Nothing is unnecessary, unimportant, or meaningless. Person, place, time, being, existence is all here for God's ultimate great plan. And I'll start off with a fascinating story. There was an Italian conductor. He was a composer and conductor. His name was Mussolini. He actually started in Israel before the foundation of the state. He started I believe they called it the Palestine Orchestra or Symphony. At one point later in his life, he had a biographer that was writing a biography about him. The biographer would come and schedule meetings with him, come by and speak to him, ask him questions. One time, the biographer gives him a call and says, "Sir, may I please come by later tonight?" And he says, "Actually, tonight's not a good night because I'm going to be listening." This is early, many years ago, maybe in the 1960s or 70s. He said, "I'm going to be listening through shortwave radio from another country. There is a student of mine that has a symphony, an orchestra that's going to be playing. He's conducting, and this is my music that I compose that he will be playing in this orchestra. And therefore, I want to be very focused listening to him playing this music, him running the orchestra, the symphony, and therefore I don't have time to have any disturbances." So this biographer says, "Actually, thinking about it, this is a great opportunity. I do want to come and watch you listen to how your student runs the orchestra. I want to see how is it that someone such a great caliber of yours that composes such great music, how is it that you pay attention and combine yourself with listening to this great orchestra?" He comes by, he sits there, he says, "I won't say a word. I won't disturb you. I'm going to be quiet the entire time." And he's watching how this conductor and composer was listening through the radio, just the audio. There was no video. And when it finishes, he says, "Wow, that was fascinating, no? Don't you think this guy did a great job?" So Mussolini turns to the biographer and he says, "It was okay, but there was one violinist missing." He said there were supposed to be 14 violinists and there were only 13. One of them was missing and therefore it wasn't perfect. He looks at him and he says, "Are you a little bit insane? You're sitting here across in a different country, listening through shortwave radio. There were 120 musicians playing a part of this orchestra. How do you think it would be possible for you to guess that there was one violinist missing? There's no way for you to tell if there's 119 people playing or 120. It's just not possible." So Mussolini tells him, he says, "That's exactly the difference between me and you." He said, you don't play music, you don't compose this music. For me, he said, this is my music. I made this. I know exactly every single note, who has to be playing with it, and why I added in. It wasn't random that I did 14 violinists, not 15 or 13, because each and every one adds something that the other one doesn't. This biographer decided not to be lazy. He contacted the conductor and he said, "How many musicians showed up last night to the orchestra?" And he said, there was actually 119 that showed up. He said, one guy, for whatever reason, didn't show up. So he goes back to Mussolini and he says, "You're right. How can you tell by just listening through shortwave radio?" And he says, when you know the purpose of every single musician, you can tell when one is lacking. In this world, God made a beautiful orchestra. It's not made up of 120 musicians. It's made up of billions of people. and trillions of other beings and existences, whether it's trees, plants, animals, mountains, water, everything that God created is intentional, a part of a beautiful symphony that together we can all play this music. If one person is missing, one time of a person, meaning a certain day of a person's act is missing, or anything else, it lacks in the entire beauty of what God wanted this world to be. So each and every person, God pays attention, watches, listens, just like the conductor is running the entire orchestra simultaneously, telling each one what they should play, when they should play. God is actively involved in our world, wanting each person to behave the way they are supposed to. Pull up over here the slides. Meanwhile, we're going to go on to page, you have it in your book, on page number 41. And Layla, if you'd like to read on page 41.
Yeah, I don't have the book, so I was relying
on... sorry. Yes. Let me pull it up over here on the screen. Give me 1 second.
Elia is ready with her book.
Oh, she found the book. Okay. So give me 1 second. I'll pull it up on the screen so that you'll be able to read that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you have over here key points. You can read that out loud.
Okay. Key points. Every entity and action in this world is guided to its ultimate purpose by God's wisdom and God's choice. The world is the way it is only because God actively desires to create it, to so create it. We must seek to help everything in creation fulfill the purpose for which it was created. At every point in time, God is pulsating our world from existence to nothingness.
That's actually a mistake. It should say the opposite, from nothingness to existence.
Oh, yeah, I was like, we have to go over that. At every moment, God is lovingly watching over us. There are no hopeless situations, no meaningless moments. Realizing God is involved in our lives empowers us, eliminates victimhood, and generates responsibility.
Great. So these are key points which we will be discussing in this class. So even if something is not exactly understandable at the moment, don't worry, we will get back to it. So we'll be able to, at the end of the class, go through this again and make sure that everything was understood and we went through everything. And Gabe, if you'd like to read over here, introduction.
Introduction. Are we the subject of an arbitrary random universe? Is life itself random? Do we have a purpose? What do we do when things seem out of our control? If there is a God, do we matter to him?
So these are the questions which we're going to start off discussing. Was the universe random, or is there a purpose to it? Because they don't go hand in hand. If it was random, there cannot be a purpose to something random. Or do we say that we matter, there was a reason, and if something's out of control, it's out of the way we think it should be of control, but ultimately in God's eyes, it's exactly the way it's supposed to be. So I'll put it up over here on the screen. We'll start with Sheila. Read over here on the screen this question and give me your answer.
Suppose you were God, how would you begin the Torah?
What would be your first verse? If you were God and writing a book of instructions to people to know how to behave, what would be your first message?
Maybe kindness.
Right.
To each other, I mean to, or
right.
Something.
No, that's a good point.
Maybe not, at least civil, maybe civil.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Now read over here as to what actually God does begin the Torah with. You have over here, read source number 1, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. What is so important about it? Oh, do I have to read that? Should I read that?
Yeah, read that. Yeah, read that.
What is so important about this verse? Why does the Torah, really a book of commandments, begin with it?
So Elia, what would you think if seemingly it would make sense to begin the Torah with something about be kind to one another? Why would God begin his Torah? Not just the first verse, but the first few chapters are discussing creation of the world. What does it make a difference if you were to buy a product from the store, and when you open up the manual how to use the product, it starts saying how the world was created? You would say, I think this is a little bit inappropriate. This is not at the right place. I didn't open this manual on how to run my electronics to find out how the world was created. God is giving us a Torah to tell us what we should do. Where does it come in? Who made the world and why they made it? It doesn't make a difference. What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it gives us an explanation, like why we're here, why we're reading the Torah. Because if he didn't start with Genesis, like it wouldn't make as much sense. Like he's explaining to us how the world began, and sort of, and it's just what it makes sense if like otherwise. Like I don't know if I would fully trust if it was just like him telling us what to do. So it makes sense why it gives us that explanation.
Great thinking. And 100% you're right. If it didn't begin the Torah with God created heaven and earth, I would say there's no room for commandments if it all happened by chance. If it's all just happens to be that we are here, there's no good or bad, there's no right or wrong. Who decides what's right or what's wrong if we just happen to be here? You could tell me your opinion, but I could tell you my opinion, right? When it comes to, let's say, murder, everybody will say that murder is wrong, but if assuming the world was created by chance, what makes murder wrong? There is no one that decided that murder is wrong. People don't like it, but maybe that's exactly why I will murder other people in order that I should survive. Meaning, you say don't murder because then it's not a good society. Well, it's not a good society if other people might murder me. So the more people that I kill, the less I have a threat to my existence. So maybe that's a good reason for me to try to annihilate all my competition, and then I'll be in existence by myself without having to fear. So if there is no reason for creation, there's no one that's telling us what's the purpose, what there is that I need to do, why I'm here, and if there is any logic or good or bad. Everything could be amoral. So going back to our slideshow, and Gabe, if you could read that for us.
Our existence is intentional.
The first principle God wants to tell us is your existence is for a reason. Something came about because God wanted it to come about. Nothing exists by itself. If we were not to say that, I'll have Gabe continue reading over here. What 6-letter word?
What 6-letter word describes the following action? Some electrons happened to collide with some protons, which happened to form into molecules, which happened to create a cell, which happened to become intelligent. Then one random intelligent thing happened to stop the function of another intelligent thing.
So what 6-letter word describes the action? I'll give you a hint. It's in the last line. It's a crime as well. And the hint is it starts with the letter M.
That's describing what a murder would be if you looked at it from a purely like materialist, detached perspective.
Correct. Very good. The answer would be murder, because if there's no purpose why we were here, then there's no good or bad. Everything is amoral. It just is. It's a fact. That's what happened. Who decided that it's wrong? You might think that it's wrong. I might think that it's not wrong. But when there's a supposed to be a certain way, tells you that there has to be a supposer. When you have a supposer, someone that creates things that are supposed to function a certain way, then there's a reason for them being there. Nothing that we create do we do without a reason. You wouldn't go to the store and buy something and say, there's absolutely no reason why I'm buying this. You might have a bad reason, but you have a reason always for buying something, for creating something, for doing something. You don't lift your hand when there's no reason. You lift it because you were tired or you wanted to reach something. So too, when God creates the world, every detail in it happened for a reason. There certainly is a reason, a purpose for the existence of everything. Let's pull up this picture over here and we'll ask Layla. read this and then give us your input on what the answer would be.
What is a better example of God's creation? The cutout drawing or a projection?
What would you say is the difference between a cutout drawing and a projection? There's many differences, but give me one.
I mean, one is like, I don't know.
Would you say,
I mean, I think
focusing on the scissor aspect of it, the scissor in the cutout drawing, the scissor has to cut out something, right? In a projection, do you have to cut out any bad lights, or do you only project what you want to project?
No, you project what you want to project.
Exactly. So with this drawing, there's going to be scrap material, correct? Whenever you cut out these figures or any arts and craft that you do, there's scrap material. God did not create the world in a way that there's scrap material, scrap people, scrap items. What, in response to the question, what is a better example of God's creation? Projection. Because when you project something, you only project exactly the colors you want and what you want to project on the wall. You don't do anything extra because there's no reason for it. It's going to disturb from what you're trying to bring out. And back to our source book. If you could read this, Layla, read Pirkei Avot 6:11.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I love Pirkei Avot. Whatever the Holy Blessed One created in his world, he created only for his glory, as it is said, all who are linked to my name, whom I have created, formed, and made for my glory. And it says, the Lord shall reign forever and ever.
Yeah. So this source is telling us from the sages, based on a verse, every single aspect was created for a purpose, for a reason, and it's our task to make sure that nothing is wasted. Like one of the prohibitions in the Torah is bal tashchit, not to destroy something that could be used for good and destroy it to make it not benefit anything, because then what's the purpose? How is it fulfilling its mission in the world? Like, for example, when it comes to funerals, in non-Jewish circles, sometimes a lot of money is wasted on items that are put into the grave. In Jewish circles, we intentionally say that it should be kept to the minimal, just the bare minimum, cheapest options, even if someone's really wealthy, because it's wasting good materials that could be used for the living, for the dead. So yes, we have to honor the dead, we have to bury them and respect them, but if there's an abundance of something, it has a reason, and it should benefit those that are alive rather than being wasted. So each and every creation in the world has its mission of what it's supposed to be doing. Let's pull up our next slide over here. And Gabe, if you'd like to read this.
The food that you eat, the flowers that you smell, and mountains upon which you hike have a purpose that you are meant to help them fulfill.
Yes. Now, we're going to move on to section C. If you're following along in the book, it's on page 46. I'll pull it up over here on the screen as well. The question is, Sheila, if you could read over here in C.
Is there a purpose in every single thing? There is individual providence over every single creation and every event, down to each blade of grass blowing in the wind. God is always watching over each of us with expectation and love.
So in this section, we're going to discuss that it's not just a general observation that God wants grass to exist, leaves to exist, animals to exist, but rather each and every blade of grass has its purpose. The Baal Shem Tov, which was the founder of the Hasidic movement, was once discussing this subject with his students, and he told them that each and every leaf that falls off the tree is a direct result of God wanting that leaf to fall off the tree. So one of the students said, well, can you show me what's the reason? He said, look at that leaf. It's flowing in the wind, going away from the tree and landing on the floor. Why did that leaf fall off the tree? So the Baal Shem Tov, this rabbi, takes his students over and he said, let me show you. He brings them over to the leaf. He picks it up and he says, look underneath. There's this little worm that was on the floor, sitting in the heat of the sun. And he said, this worm was crying out to God, saying, I'm so hot, I might die just from this heat. Wherever I go, the sun is shining on me. God made a leaf fall off the tree and land exactly where the worm was to protect it and give it shade from the sun. Not every time do we see a leaf falling off is it because there's a worm. Sometimes it's too detailed for us as human beings to know why God did it, but ultimately every single aspect that happens in the world is for a reason. I'll share a quick story that happened with me just last week. I was driving on Hualalai Road over here in Kona, and I see a woman that was walking. She was an elderly woman. She had like a long stick as a cane. It wasn't a proper cane. It was a self-made cane. And she was walking like a little wobbly. It was during the daytime, 10 a.m., and similar to what someone would walk when they're drunk. And it didn't look right. So as I drove past her, I looked back in my rear view mirror to see what's going on. And I noticed that just as I passed her and I looked back, she fell on the floor and hit her head on the pavement. I right away stopped the car. I ran out. I called 911 even before I got to her because I knew it's definitely not going to be a great scenario. And sure enough, she was bleeding from her head. She was an elderly woman. She lives by Hualalai Elderly, which is right on Hualalai Road, near, for those that are familiar, near the Regency. And someone else also stopped. They had some tissues, so they gave me the tissues. I put it to stop the bleeding. I lifted up her head in order to stop the flow from coming out. Her head should be a little elevated, so at least gravity should work for our favor. We had the ambulance on the line. They said they're coming, and sure enough, they came a few minutes later. They thanked us for our help, and they took away the woman to the hospital. I left. This was 10 a.m. I went to do my day. That day, my wife decided that she wants to go to a park that has higher elevation, so it should be cooler. So she went to a park in Kealakekua, which is about 20 minutes away from our home, near the hospital. It's a park that has like not that many slides, but it's at 1,500 feet elevation, so it's a lot cooler there. She went there and she said, when you finish your day, come there and we'll have dinner at the park. So I finished my day. I went to the park. On my way to the park, I was passing by the hospital, and right before I passed the hospital, I saw the same woman, and I was almost sure that it was her because I recognized she had a straw hat and she had this long stick that she was using as a cane. And I recognized her and I said, what in the world is going on? When she originally fell and I stopped to help her, I asked her if everything's okay. Is she feeling lightheadedness? Is she feeling sick? And she said, I don't know, I've been falling a lot today. She said, I already fell 11 times. This is my 12th time falling. But all the other times were at home. And I don't know why she went out that day, but I guess either she has Alzheimer's or something. She's not able to come to great conclusions by herself. So she clearly fell a lot of times that day. And I was like, a woman that fell so many times went to the hospital and they let her out just like that to walk home. Now she was walking on the side of the road from the hospital, which is maybe a 10-mile walk. So you're looking at a few hours to walk home. And this is not a person that's running marathons. So I wasn't sure, but either I had to run to the park to meet up with my family. On my way back, I said, I'm going to go slow. When I passed the hospital going back towards Kona, I want to see if I can find her again. And sure enough, I was going slow and I spotted her on the side of the road walking. She wasn't even looking to get a ride. She didn't have her thumb out or anything. So I stopped by and I say, sorry, are you going to Hualalai Elderly? Because it's near my home. I was heading that direction. She said, yes, I'm actually walking there. I said, do you mind if I give you a ride? She didn't recognize me from earlier in the day. She said, yeah, that's so kind of you. Thank you. So I brought her into the car and I drove her home and I was asking her, I said, what happened in the hospital? She said, yeah, I fell earlier today. They took me to the hospital. They gave me some staples in her head and they said they let me go. I was going to take the bus. The bus never showed up, so I decided to walk. I said, do you realize how far of a walk this is? And she said, yeah, I don't know. I was just walking. She wasn't exactly fully coherent to make it something logical where she can make it home by herself. So I don't know what was going through her mind, but I guess she's maybe not exactly fully competent to make great decisions. But luckily, that day is the day my wife decided to go to that park. If I would have driven down that road a minute earlier, a minute later, I would either miss her or maybe not notice her on the side of the road. If I would have not gone to the park that day, the last time my wife and I went to that park with the kids was maybe a year or two ago because it's further away. Happens to be that day my wife decided to go to the park and I was able to meet this woman on the side of the road because otherwise I wouldn't be driving near the hospital and I was able to give her a ride back home. That's what we call divine providence. Each and every step of our lives, anything that happens to us is all orchestrated by God. If we made a wrong turn on the highway, if we ended up not getting accepted to the college we wanted to go to, we missed the flight, we got a flat tire, any mishap in our life is not a mishap because something is out of control and there's just nature getting in the way of our enjoyment or our plans. It's all planned by God. Every single detail has a reason why it's happening. Sometimes we see it and sometimes we don't, but everything has a reason why it's happening. Let's continue over here with, again, Pirkei Avot, the first one. And Sheila, if you'd like to read, he.
He, Ben Azai, used to say, do not underestimate any person and do not discriminate against anything. For there is no man who does not have his moment, and there is no thing that does not have its place.
So he's saying over here a very fundamental lesson in life, which is sometimes we treat certain people or certain things, oh, this is not important. People burn bridges. They treat someone that has not good luck or someone that didn't have a good relationship with them, they'll destroy the relationship with them in a ways that it's very hard to amend because they say, I'll never need that person again. Comes Ben Azai and he says, nothing doesn't have its time, nothing doesn't have its place. Every single thing has its time, its purpose, its success, the time that it's going to be great. And don't treat anything as if it's insignificant. Every aspect in the world, not just humans, are for a reason. And let's read Medrash Rabbah. Elia, if you'd like to read, Rabbi Simon.
Rabbi Simon, or like Simon, but is it supposed to be pronounced Simon?
Yeah, it's actually Simon. If you see in the Hebrew, I highlighted it, Simon.
Oh, got it. Okay. Rabbi Simon said, there's no blade of grass that does not have an angel, influencing force in heaven that hits it and tells it grow. Wait, can I read that again? I didn't process it.
Yeah.
There's no blade of grass that does not have an angel in heaven that hits it and tells it grow. Okay, I understood.
Basically, every aspect of the world only continues functioning because God makes it continue function. There's nothing that runs on its own, which is so empowering to us because it allows us to take on the world and say there is a mission in every aspect. Every time in my life is for a reason. Coronavirus happened, it's for a reason. If I know the reason or not necessarily. But I have to say my job is to make the best of that situation that I find myself in. Now, to be fair, this is actually a matter of dispute. Some say, which we'll get to the second source in a moment, that God's intervention or God's plan is only specifically regarding humans. When it comes to other items in the world, like when it comes to animals or plants, mountains or oceans, in those, God doesn't have a specific plan for every single aspect, but it's more a general idea that he wants some vegetables, some fruit, and then each and every one is its own field. It's not each one is particular. It's more like God wanted a general idea of the world, but not every blade of grass is as important. So the first source clearly says that every blade of grass is important and a part of the success. Other opinions say that it's just a general, he wants the species to exist, but not each specific individual one. And he gives it as an example. We'll pull it up over here. Imagine you were making a film. Now in your film, you have actors, directors, props, costumes, equipment, food, transportation, logistics, a budget. Which one of these arrangements are crucial to the movie? And which arrangements are background elements that are, of course, important, but of lesser importance? Layla, what do you think?
I mean, I think what's crucial is that, like, you need the camera, maybe one person behind the camera and one person, or no, it could be just anything in front of the camera, but extra things are like costumes, lighting, the extent.
Very good. Perfect. Yeah, 100%. You got it right. Some things are essential. Maybe you would say an actor or something in front of the camera. But if you had a prop less, a prop more, doesn't make a big difference. So this opinion says, so too when God created the world, there are the humans, the main actors in the play, they need to be there. But then everything else is just like additional props to make it look nice. And we'll read it over here, the source inside. A moment. Here you have it from the Sefer HaChinuch. And Gabe, if I could ask you to read the first paragraph.
Because the opinions are many about the providence of God upon all his creatures, many verses in scripture and many commandments come to instruct about the matter. Given that it is the cornerstone of our Torah, as there are groups of people that think that the providence of God, may he be blessed, is individualized upon all of the species, whether people or all other animals. And there are groups that think that the providence of God, blessed be he, is upon all the matters of the world, whether animals or all other things, meaning to say that no small thing in the world moves without his will, blessed be he, and his decree, to the point that they may think regarding the falling of one leaf from a tree that he decreed about it, that it should fall. And so it is impossible that the time of its falling be even a second later or earlier. And this opinion is very removed from the intellect.
So this opinion, which is from the Sefer HaChinuch, he, according to his assumption, it's not something that God is involved with every leaf falling off the tree. What we follow, the bottom line, the contemporary conclusion, which the Hasidic movement follows as well, is that, as we'll see momentarily, we'll prove it from the fact of God continuously creating the world, that it is involved with every single aspect of the world, whether it's a leaf or a blade of grass, it's all part of God's greater plan. Let's move on to the next slide. So we started discussing the first aspect of God's providence, that everything is intentional, everything is for a reason, and God is focused on every single detail. In addition, it's not just that everything is for a reason, but there's actively God observing us. And Sheila, if you'd like to read this.
I can't read, it's too far over. God is constantly watching or guiding every step. How does, I guess, that make you feel?
Yeah. How does that make you feel to know that God is watching and guiding, which means he's helping us in every step of our life? Does that make you feel like the NSA is a little bit targeting you and hacking into every single detail of your life and you have no privacy? Or does that make you feel like the greatest being is actually having so much trust in me that he's assisting me and training me into this job, which I might have not known how to do this by myself? He's guiding me in every step and saying, I believe in you, I trust in you, you can do a great job. Which feeling does it give you if you say God is constantly watching you? Sheila.
Oh, well, I think it should be that it should make you, if you think God is constantly watching you, you should behave better.
Yeah. So it's not in a way, a negative way. We're saying, oh, you should feel so guilty. There's someone out there to constantly catch you do something wrong. It's on the contrary. God is there. Like, imagine you came to a job and you're so insecure about, could you do this job? Could you not? And the boss of the company says, I believe in you so much. I want to be your personal trainer. I'm going to be standing next to you to guide you and help you. Anytime you have a question, come to me. I will show you how to turn this on and how to operate this machine and how to process this order. And in the sense, you feel like, wow, could this really be true? That he so much thinks that I'm that valuable to the company that he himself wants to be on my side every single time and show me exactly what to do. Of course, it demands that we should behave appropriately, but it's also so encouraging for the person to realize that the great creator of the entire world spends his time focused on me because I mean so much to him. As we say in Avot, and we'll give this one to Lila again, her favorite book. Read over here, Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 2, verse Mishnah 1.
Know what is above you, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all of your actions are transcribed in a book.
Very good. If we would just keep this phrase in front of us our entire lives, we would be such better human beings. Because why do people do wrong things? They think no one's going to find out.
That's right.
Every sin boils down to saying, I don't want anybody to know. I was in the parking lot and I noticed a lady that was handling her child really roughly. The child was screaming. She didn't have any patience, like roughly throwing him into the car and buckling him in to the seat, giving him a lot of attitude back because apparently she was going through a hard day. And then when she turned around and noticed me, she right away started kissing the kid and showing a lot of love. Why do you think she all of a sudden would change her mode of how she's acting with her kid? Elia, why do you think someone would change because they saw me?
Because they don't want you to think that they're like abusing their child.
Right. Very good. When other people watch us, we behave appropriately. Hands down. Whenever we do something wrong, we don't want anybody to know. That's what we say. We say, well, I do it in my private room. No one's watching. No one will see. It's okay. If everybody would know, I don't want to do it. Every sin is committed when someone wants to do it without someone noticing. You steal quietly. If someone commits other sins, whether it's between them and man or them and God, you don't want to do it in an open way. Comes the Mishnah and tells us, if we were to keep in mind that there is always someone watching us, an eye that sees everything, an ear that hears everything, and everything gets written down, meaning God doesn't forget it. And at the end of our lives, God pulls out this book and he says, let's go through together and see, did you live a life perfectly the way you could have? Or did you give yourself a lot of slack? And were there room for you to become a better person? That is God watching us. And the divine providence is not just that he orchestrates everything around us, but he believes in us and he says, please, I'm your coach and you could be the greatest player in the NBA or NFL, whatever sport you're part of. I want to encourage you and watch you and push you and say, come on, you can do it. Push yourself to the limits. God is standing there and cheering us on. Our greatest fan is God. The one that truly believes that we are worthwhile of being in this world is God. And he is constantly telling us, you can do it, make it. You can become the great person that I intended that you should become. And Gabe, if you'd like to read the second paragraph here.
Sure. God is aware of all the deeds of people, and he has not abandoned them. Not as the heretics have quoted as saying, God has abandoned the world. Rather, as it states, great in counsel and mighty in deed. Your eyes are aware of all the ways of people to give to each according to his ways and the consequences of his deeds. And as it further states, God saw that the wickedness of man was great upon the earth. These verses clearly demonstrate this idea.
So this is from Maimonides. He says, a part of the Jewish belief is that God does care what we do. Some assume God has to be so great. Why would he bother himself with what a bunch of small, lowly human beings are doing? How could that affect God? God is busy with big cosmos and universes and planets. What a simple guy does in a faraway island, that is no consequential difference to God. But a fundamental belief in divine providence is that God is also involved, watching and waiting each and every one of us. We are part of his symphony. We make a difference to the entire orchestra. When we could be the best person we could become, then God is happy with us, with the entire world. It's not that it's just random. And we'll have the next source as well. Sheila, if you'd like to read over here. This is from Tanya.
Behold, God stands by him, and his glory fills the earth. And he looks at him and assesses the kidneys and heart, whether he is serving him properly.
Yeah, and Elia, if you'd like to read these two paragraphs.
We must realize that at every moment, at every time, God is watching us with love, or is watching us with love and expectation. This makes us feel both secure and responsible. Firstly, every single thing we do will affect God's ultimate plan. That means we each matter. Secondly, God will be there to watch us do it. If we are standing before God, what influence might that have on our behavior? Keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. This can also make us feel very secure. We are not the subject of an arbitrary, is that even the word? Yeah.
Arbitrary.
Arbitrary sorry, what?
Arbitrary.
Yeah, okay, got it. Random universe. Not only will God listen when we will call out to him, but we are constantly in the secure hands of our loving Father every step of the way.
Perfect. So this is the second point that we're trying to bring out of how ultimately God is involved and watches us in every step, every aspect of our life. And like we say here, in every moment, Gabe, if you'd like to read this entire.
The entire universe was not just created and sent spinning, but being recreated every moment by God himself. If he stopped recreating something for just 1 second, it would cease to exist.
Now we're getting into the next point about divine providence. God, if I ask you a question, how did God create the world? Was it in a way where he set up a system, he wrote a program, he said, this is the energy the world needs, and now it's running on its own, let the world figure itself out? Or is he actively recreating, re-involved with the world to the degree that he was in the beginning of creation, where every single aspect is only in existence because of him? Think of it as a plane flying in the air. When the plane flies, the motors have to constantly be on to keep the plane in the air. The second you shut off the motors, the plane starts falling from the sky, because heavy metal like the plane cannot stay in the sky unless you have a motor keeping it up in the sky. The world naturally should not exist on its own. If God were to stop creating the world, each and every moment, the world would just stop existing, because unlike when something is already in existence and we are just switching it from metal into an airplane, that will continue staying an airplane. But when you're fighting against its nature, like not just turning metal into an airplane, but making the airplane fly in the air, if you are not continuously pushing that energy in order to keep the plane in the air, the plane will not stay in the air. So if the world on its own would not exist, God has to continuously and actively create the world to keep it in existence. And Sheila, if you'd like to read this, unlike,
I can't, it has to be moved a little bit. Unlike white something where things drawn and I can't read the rest of it.
Yeah, it could be just because the lighting is bad. So Elia, if you
No, the pictures are on that side, and I don't know. I'm not smart enough to move it. So.
Oh, okay. No worries. So, Elia,
it's not the yeah.
Unlike a whiteboard where things are drawn and erased, every moment that the projection will last needs to be generated by the projector.
If you wanted to take off a projection from the wall, do you have to stand up on the wall and erase the projection? Or do you just have to stop projecting it for it to stop being on the wall? Layla, if I wanted to take a projection off the wall, do I have to erase it like a whiteboard? Or do I just stop projecting?
No, you stop projecting it.
Why? Because it doesn't really exist on its own on the wall. It's only there because of my projection. So as soon as I stop, it stops existing. So too with the world on its own would not exist. Even now, after we exist, it's because God made it that naturally it looks like we exist. But we are like the projection. Or if you think of it as something in your mind, if you're sitting in class, or maybe now, and you're daydreaming about some trip to the safari in South Africa, and you start imagining in great detail the car you're in and the types of animals you're seeing and the beautiful landscape that you're experiencing, what do you have to do to destroy that image that you have in your mind? Do you have to stand there and take an axe or a hammer and destroy it? Or do you just stop thinking about it and it all disappears? Gabe, what do you think?
Yeah, you just stop thinking and about it. Yeah, then the daydream is over, like that.
Right. A daydream by nature is a dream. It's not real in reality. With this world, it is a real world, but it's only real because God made it a real world. If God would stop continuously making it into a real world, it would stop existing. So God is constantly recreating and bringing this world back into existence. As we'll read over here in this source. Gabe, if you could read over here the first paragraph. He
who in his goodness renews every day continuously the deeds of creation. As it says, he who creates in present tense the great luminaries for his loving kindness is forever. Blessed are you, God, who creates the light, luminaries.
So God creates continuously, not just in the beginning of creation. And as we have it from Maimonides, Layla, if you'd like to read.
There is a completely perfect being who is the cause of everything else. He created everything. Everything exists within him, and all continued existence depends on him. If he did not exist, nothing else could exist. However, if nothing aside from him existed, he would continue to exist as before without any deficiency, because he does not need anything outside of himself. Everything else, whether spiritual or physical, is dependent on him. This principle is stated in the verse, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so many questions. So it says he created everything. Everything exists within him. Okay, so I don't know, I'm no expert on Kabbalah, but in the concept of CteenU, God contracted himself to create the world, and it says everything exists within him, but isn't the world like inherently, according to that concept, not God, although dependent and created by God?
Yeah, so great question. And if I understood correctly, tell me if this would answer your question. When God created a concealment, which the Tzimtzum is a concealment of God, he didn't take himself away from the world completely. Because if he took himself away, we wouldn't exist. He is still actively involved, just in a hidden way, which we mentioned this in last class. God intentionally hid himself, not that he isn't here. So everything in the world is dependent on God, needs God for it to exist. God does not need anything in order for him to exist. Meaning, if there was no world, there would still be God. If there was no God, there would be no world. So God just hid himself by the Tzimtzum. He said, I don't want myself to be revealed in the world, because then people will not have free choice. They will not be in existence the way they are now. They'll be spiritual beings that are so nullified to God, they'll never do anything wrong. I want humans that are separated, or appear to be separated is a more correct term, appear to be independent beings that can think we created ourselves. This is part of God's plan, that he said, I want the world to be so hidden from me that people in the world can assume they created themselves, or that they came into being without God. That's exactly what God wanted, but nevertheless, he's just as involved as he was from the beginning. He just chose to do it in a hidden way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So continuing on the next page, this is a little bit of a lengthy paragraph, but I'll give in short what he's trying to say. He says, there are two ways, which we mentioned this earlier. People say, why is it that God needs to create the world every day? If a craftsman makes a silver goblet, he doesn't have to be there every day in order to continue creating the goblet. He makes it, he walks away, he could even die and the goblet still exists. Why is it that God would need to actively be involved in creating the world? And this is what he speaks about in Tanya, and he says, when you're changing something from nothing to something, meaning naturally it should not exist, and you're making it exist, like the example he gives is by the splitting of the Red Sea. The splitting of the Red Sea, you had an ocean, God made a strong wind come and make the water stand up like a wall, right? When he split the sea, he said, two parts of the sea will split. Here you'll have a wall of water, here you'll have a wall of water, and what was holding it up? An extremely strong wind. If God would stop the wind from holding up the water as a wall, would the water fall back on its own? It would just naturally go back to its previous existence, which was water naturally doesn't stand like a wall, it floats, or it tries to level itself out. So if God were not to make an active wind blow on the water would go back to its natural state. God doesn't have to do anything in order to make the water go back. He just has to stop forcing it to do something against its nature. so too with the world, naturally, the nature of nothingness is to be nothing. The nature of something that didn't exist is to not exist. If I were to ask you to create something out of nothing, you cannot do it because you need something to create something. From nothing, it shouldn't be here. So if I magically made an illusion where something appears to be in existence, it wouldn't really be there. We all understand. Either you're giving me an illusion or you were hiding something that really was there before. But if I was guaranteeing you that that thing was not there before, you would tell me that it's just an illusion that I'm seeing it. It can't really be there because you cannot create something out of nothing. God creates something out of nothing, but because its original state is a nothingness, he has to continuously push it against its nature to continue existing, or otherwise it would go back to being nothing. And like we'll see over here on this slide, Gabe, if you'd like to read this.
What is the difference between the involvement of a personnel in the following professions?
So you have your craftsman and you have an IT guy. What would you say is a difference between, of course, there's many differences, but give me one of them that you would say is a difference between them. Or how about this? Why would you say an IT guy can make more money than the craftsman?
I suppose because the IT guy maybe can make stuff quicker, or can focus on different projects at once. I'm not. That's interesting.
Very good. Yeah. The IT guy makes more money because he can set up a program that works without him being there every single moment. There's a limit of how much time you have in your day. So if you want to make more money, you have to set things up that generate money for you without you working. Similar to real estate or stocks, you can sit around and sleep and make money by having something that does it on its own. Versus a craftsman, he only earns money when he's working. There's no money that's generated by him sleeping because he does not have a system set up where it just constantly is producing value, but rather he needs to actively be involved. With God, God did not create the world like the IT guy, where he says, yeah, I'll spend a few years, I'll make the program, and then I just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. On the contrary, God is actively involved like the craftsman, saying every single day, I am hands-on with this world, following up, creating it, looking what everybody is doing, and making sure that it's reaching its ultimate goal. We have over here an animation for a movie. Anybody can describe to me, Elia, how are movies made? You have a hint in this screen, in this image. How do people make movies, especially when there's a lot of cool things happening in the movie that the average person cannot do?
Like CGI? Or like, what do you mean? Like, how do people actually?
How do they show something that is not possible for me to do, but somehow in the movies they can do it? Like this guy stands up without using his hands or legs somehow miraculously, or he's able to jump up 100 feet in the air. How do they do it?
I mean, they like edit it and they like take multiple takes and stuff. I don't know.
Exactly. No, yeah, 100%. They take independent frames, and therefore they can align them or resequence them where it's not anymore in the original form. So they'll take a video of someone falling down, and then they'll just reverse it and make it look like the person standing up. They'll take someone jumping off a plane, and then he could go down 100 feet. They'll reverse it and it makes it look like he's jumping up 100 feet. So it's changing the sequence of the pictures. It's a bunch of specific pictures. You move it around in any way you want, and then you can make it appear like something else is happening, right? Let's look at this this trickster.
Like my costume? Yeah, oh, that's so cool. How are you doing that? I got a Nimbus 2000. Oh, I see. Wait, is that my longboard? Longboardium Leviosa! Longboard, come back here. Dude, no. Yeah. All right, game point. Good game. Get your Monday. Wait. What?
Come on, Zach. You asked me to get you in shape, and that's exactly what I'm about to do. Come on, get those elbows out. Let's make this happen. Let's go. So heavy. Gotta hurt. New year, new you. 2020 is yours, man. Let's make it happen. Need some water. Hey, but get out of here.
So if you take that idea for a moment, in all of these cases, they're playing with the sequence of they take a video of it before, a video of it after, and then they switch around the order in order to get the production that they want to show you. So too, when it comes to God creating the world, it's not like he set up a system that just operates on its own, but it's like a film where God, each and every moment, can put in any new result that he wants. Just because prior it didn't seem like something was the case, God can change it, and now it does look like that. Just like as a person does in films, they switch around things in order to give you the entertainment that they would like to produce. So too, God animates our universe, and every moment is being generated frame by frame, independent of what happened in the past or what will happen in the future. That comes to tell us, number one, that it's not just a general plan, but every moment of our lives is a part of a specific idea of what God wants. But on the even more so, since God is recreating the universe every single moment, it means every moment has a meaning. Everything has its purpose. Let's see over here, this animation.
All these creatures in my Isifier, they seem so real. Hey, where did they all go? Oops, looks like I tripped over the plug. Get that circuit back into action, and they're all back, like they never disappeared. You know what? They don't even realize that they were gone for a moment. What about our reality? Well, we're also getting a constant current of isifying energy. Every moment we're created anew. And if for one moment that current would stop, we'd be gone as though we never were. That's why this moment now is so powerful, because right now, all your past, present, and future has just been regenerated out of absolute nothing. And again now, and now, and...
So this is coming to show us how just as something in animation with electricity needs electricity in order for it to flow, so too we as humans need God constantly to be involved in order for us to continue with what we're having in our lives. And let's read over here this part. Layla, if you'd like to read E.
Every moment has meaning. Every event is orchestrated by God, and every individual moment has a purpose and is independent from the one before. There is nothing that was created as a side effect or a scrap. Therefore, there is no hopeless situation.
Like if you were, imagine the principal, and you go into school, into the hall, and you see a huge wreck. You demand from the students, hey, what's going on? What's this mess? Why isn't it being cleaned up? And they say, oh, we just had this great production, this musical presentation, and it was an outstanding success. And now we just have to clean up all the props and all the costumes and all the details that we did, all the structures that we built for this presentation. We just have to clean up the mess. You would understand that you don't desire the mess. No one wants that mess, but it's just an automatic outcome from having a play. You're gonna have a mess later on that you need to clean. Unlike in God's case, God does not work like that. In his mind, just because something happened and there was a play doesn't mean there needs to be all that scrap or all the side effects that need to be cleaned and taken care of because something happened in the past. Each and every moment is an existence on its own, and therefore anything that happens to us is not because, well, it just had to happen based on everything else that happened in my life. This was a sequence of events. This had to be the result. It's not part of God's plan. It just was out of control. No, when it comes to God, we say, just because something has happened doesn't mean that therefore the next thing has to happen. If it happens, it's for a purpose, for a meaning, because God wanted it to happen. Let's scroll down here. And Sheila, if you'd like to read over here, what?
What can we learn about each moment when we consider how every moment is completely independent from the moment before it and the moment after it?
Right? Since God is creating each and every moment, just because something is happening doesn't mean that it's going to be like that. And here we have an example from the Talmud, even if you read that as well, even if a sharp
sword lies upon the neck of a person, let him not give up hope for God's mercy.
Right? There's never a time where he says, well, now already this has to happen, because each and every moment, God is actively involved in the world. So a miracle can happen at any point. How many times have doctors told someone, there's no way you can get up from this sickness. There's no way this person can survive. There's no way this will happen. And all of a sudden it happens. Because if it's all based on nature, yes, there is no natural way it could happen. But since God is recreating every moment, he can at any time decide that just because prior this happened doesn't mean the next time the same results will come about. Right? And the last one, since every moment
is being independently regenerated by God, there is really no relationship between one moment and the next.
Yeah. Let's have over here. Elia, if you'd like to read this picture.
There might be a sharp sword on one's neck, but in the very next moment, the sword can literally cease to exist.
Yeah. So there's no moment in our life that is hopeless. There's certainly no moment that is meaningless. If God made it happen, there must be a reason for it. Now, if that's the case, you might say, well, if so, do we have free choice? If everything is in God's control, is there free choice? Or why do bad things happen to good people? If God is ultimately the one making everything happen, there should never be a bad thing happening to good people. Those two questions we'll get to in the next two lessons. We'll discuss those ideas. But what we're getting to over here, the first concept, is that it's all happening for a reason, even if we don't see it. To give an illustration of how sometimes we don't see why something is happening, look at this picture. Can anybody tell me what's a hidden message that there is over here? You might have heard it before. Do you see any hidden message in this logo? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The logo uses negative space to make an arrow in between the E and the X.
X, yeah, very good. So right here, you can see that arrow. Good point that you pointed that out. We have here to explain. If you concentrate your attention on the letters E and X, the negative space creates an arrow pointing forward. This signifies forward or moving forward, which is what the company does. So if you look at that again, this white is an arrow moving forward. That's a hidden message that they're trying to give you in their logo. Let's take another logo, for example. And anybody, do you see, or do you know what's the logo of Adidas? What's their hidden message they're trying to tell you? Maybe you never heard it before. So this is the shape of 3 stripes on the Adidas logo represents a mountain pointing out towards the challenges that are seen ahead and goals that can be achieved. So it's trying to show you how one can grow, become better, stronger with their clothing, of course. Anybody know what's this hidden message that you have in the Amazon logo?
Is it like A to Z? So they like
Very
have
good. Very good. What do you think A to Z means? What are they trying to say, A to Z?
They have everything, or like they sort of?
No, very good. They're trying to say that they sell from A to Z. We have it over here. The logo has an arrow pointing from A to Z. Signifies that they sell everything, millions of products. And also it forms a smile. If you go back, you could see a little bit of that smile that they're trying to show you. Last one. Anybody know what this is? I'm sure you know the company, but what's the significant of this logo? Why specifically this? This is actually an interesting one because it's connected to a biblical verse. In the beginning of Genesis, you have Adam and Eve. The apple is a reference from the story of Adam and Eve, where, to be honest, some say it was an apple, but in Jewish sources it gives other fruit. But assuming that it was an apple, the apple represents the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And with a pun on byte, because a gigabyte versus like the memory information, when you take a bite of the apple, it gave them knowledge. So apple is trying to represent that take a bite of the apple, meaning get an Apple product and you will get knowledge, you will become more intelligent, smarter. This is representing the advancements of technology. So these are hidden messages that you have inside of logos. So too in the world, God has his hidden reasons behind everything. We don't see it. We just see the plain world. We think that it's getting out of control, someone else's problem, someone else's mistake, but there's a divine providence in every aspect. So just to wrap up what we went through, we had a few points here regarding divine providence. Number one, we said that God is telling us that this is all intentional. It was all for a reason. There's nothing extra. There's no scrap. There's nothing that was without a purpose. Each and every single thing has a purpose, even a blade of grass, according to the second opinion, which we follow. As well as God is watching over us, meaning he is there to encourage us, to cheer us on, to tell us that he believes in us. And he says, know that someone is watching you will help you do the right thing. And in every moment, he recreates the world, which tells us that there's no moment that's a mistake, that's insignificant, unimportant, or meaningless. Every moment has its meaning, its purpose, its reason, and it has its hidden message. So let's read through our key points. We'll start with Elia. Read the first one.
Every entity and action in the world is guided to its ultimate purpose by God's wisdom and God's choice.
Yeah, so what do you have to say on that point based on what we had in the class?
I think that, like you said, God is there all the time. Everything that happens is a like calculated move, like a leaf falling from a tree. So all those things, I think, are guided, make God's wisdom, I guess. I don't know. That didn't really make sense.
No, you said good. Not make God's wisdom, but they're all guided by God's wisdom, right? No, but what you said is
what I meant. Yeah.
Right. No, you said good. You said good. And Gabe, if you'd like to read the second one.
The world is the way it is only because God actively desires to so create it.
Okay, so tell me, what do you take from that, based on from before the class or after the class?
That means that basically everything in the world exists in the way that it does because God desires it to be that way.
Right. Very good.
Everything is driven by that, basically.
Right. Meaning ultimately it's only God that's in power, and the one that's creating it, making it be as it is. Without God, nothing would be so. Okay, Layla, next one.
That one.
Yep.
We must seek to help everything in creation fulfill the purpose for which it was created.
Okay, and elaborate on that. What did you take away from the class?
Well, I think just knowing that everything that it was created has a purpose and that nothing is like scrap or no situation is hopeless. And
whose responsibility is it to do that, to make sure that everything is able to do its purpose?
It's ours.
Right. Yeah, very good. When it comes to plants, trees, mountains, we said it's our responsibility. Okay, and Sheila, the next one.
At every point in time, God is pulsating our world from existence to nothingness.
Which again, this is a mistake to say from nothingness to existence, which
Oh,
means
right.
we gave an example of what? Can you think of an example of something else that needs constant energy in order to make it be the way it is? Like an airplane?
Oh.
right? We said an airplane, it wouldn't fly in the air if the engine stopped spinning. No, it wouldn't continue flying. So God needs to constantly make our world exist because naturally we wouldn't be here. Okay, and Elia, next one.
Every moment, God is lovingly watching over us. There are no hopeless situations, no meaningless moments. And like, again, God is like watching over us, and like everything happens for a reason. So like what you said, like if we don't, like if something we think negative or like something sad happens, God made it happen for a reason, which will lead up to something else. And then him watching over us gives us a reason to do good and to know that someone's always watching.
Right.
So that we can.
Does that make you feel oppressed, or does that make you feel, I guess, trusted with such a great mission?
It makes me feel trusted because then I know that like everything's going to be good, and like, well, not 100%, but like then I know like that everything happens for a reason, and something bad happen will lead to something good happening.
Right. Which we'll get into why bad things happen to good people. We'll get into it next class. But this is more to tell us that God is watching over us because he cares for each and every one of us. It's like the conductor. He doesn't just sit there and wave his hands for no reason. He's telling each and every musician what they should play, when they should play it, how they should do it, when to stop, when to start. So God is saying, you guys are so good. You're such great musicians. You can make yourselves be these amazing beings. I need you to do it because you're just so worthwhile, or you're so capable of being able to do it. The biggest problem is that we don't trust ourselves as much as God trusts us. We think of ourselves as so insignificant, where God says, of course you mean a lot. Of course you can do so much. But with society, especially if you look around, that we make an image of who is supposed to be the success, and we feel like we didn't reach that celebrity or that actor or whatever else we think of those people are success. And then we say, well, God doesn't really care about me. He just has the few top big shots that he's involved with, and the rest of the people are just, from the millions of citizens that are not that significant to what goes on in the country. But in God's eyes, no. Every single person is being watched lovingly and supported by God. And Gabe, next one.
Realizing God is involved in our lives empowers us, eliminates victimhood, and generates responsibility. So I think that means that because God is watching over us, that encourages us to be our best selves and to try to always improve ourselves and be our best is basically what I think that means.
Yeah, 100%. So victimhood in general doesn't go align with Judaism. Victimhood means someone else is in charge of me and they victimized me and decided how my life should be. If we believe in God, of course, if someone else did something bad, they should be held accountable for it. But if it happened to me, it was only because God wanted it to happen. And I can either take this as a challenge, which I fail by giving into it and not allowing myself to grow because of it. Or I can say, this happened to me, but I will not allow it to bug me down. On the contrary, I will use this as a catalyst, as a stepping stool, as a room for growth to become a better person because I went through this challenge. So any challenge, any struggle that comes our way, it's empowering us to become a better person because God's giving it to us saying, without this, apparently you're not maximizing your potential, and I want to bring out some new greatness in you, and I'm the one giving it to you. It might come through someone else, and they might have to hold themselves accountable as to why they chose to do something bad, but the fact that it happened to you, which we're going to discuss this next class as well, is because of what God wants, and it's ultimately in his greater plan for the world. With that, we'll conclude. Thank you all for joining. It was a pleasure learning with you, and we will follow up again next week with finding meaning in suffering. All the best. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.